Carrie Harrison with you. Love having you with me and me being with you. You know, there's a real joy in not having the FCC looking over your shoulder and being able to have true, unblemished freedom of speech. So, this is it. And we're going to talk about something today that it just rankles everybody. A lot of people love it because they get to feel comfortable, probably for the first time ever. And who can blame them if suddenly you're seen for the first time ever? It's exciting. And then other people don't get it. They just don't get it. And we're going to talk a little bit about a weird kind of inverted oppression, being forced to do something that you don't understand, or maybe you don't feel as relevant to you if people want to use their eyeballs. And I'm talking about pronouns. But first, let me introduce my best friends who are here. I can't say enough nice stuff about them because they're old relationships that have come back through the miracle of Mark Zuckerberg. He has done one or two good things recently. One is reintroducing us through his platform. I want to bring on Rory Penland. He is somewhere near Orlando, Florida.
Hola.
Hola. And you are not committing a third-degree felony, but I am. And I'm in Tampa Bay today because I'm going to say the word gay, which is going to come up during this conversation, a third-degree felony. If I were to mention slavery as being a bad thing, that would be a third-degree felony in the state of Florida. But who doesn't love Ron DeSantis?
And Thank you, Governor DeSantis.
Who doesn't embrace all this beauty? Speaking of beauty, Vladimir Putin's former girlfriend, Renee. Hello.
Yes. And I love that that's your go-to for me. Thank you.
Sorry, he threw you over for Tucker.
Well, Tucker is pretty adorable with the baby face. I couldn't, I didn't have all the same parts that Vladimir really prefers. So
and that laugh.
Oh boy.
Do we even know? I hear that they have the most amount of gay bars per capita in the world, per capita in a certain confined space in Moscow, where it is so illegal. But the Duma, like a full third of them or more, are out there just doing the hokey pokey and getting their wee enthroated. And all these other new words that we invented last week.
Yeah,
that's actually Siberia. It's very cold, so they get to keep warm.
They have to keep warm somehow. And Putin loves his boy toys, and we don't want to deprive him of that because when he doesn't have his boy toys, then he bombs or nukes somebody, and it's better.
He rides bear out this bear chest.
Well, clearly, whatever it is you're doing, you have to really loudly say it's forbidden. Because if it's not something you're doing, guess what? It's not on your radar.
Well, it's like Uday Hussein. Uday Hussein had those crazy parties and all that. There was some boy stuff going on there.
I have video, actual half-inch video, also formerly known as VHS, of Saddam Hussein driving speedboats with a bunch of mostly bathing-suited, Speedo-wearing young lads. And he was, shall we say, not as young at the time. What is that? But I suppose a flapping burqa off the back of a speedboat. I don't know.
Well, in Afghanistan, they have the boys, right? The boys dancing in Afghanistan. That's a part of their culture. It's considered not gay somehow. It's like when you go to prison and you're not gay when you have a boyfriend because you're only in prison and,
Who is the receptive partner?
Right. It matters who's the receiver.
That's right.
The receiver is important because if you're not the receiver, then you're not gay.
That's exactly right.
Drops the soap.
Yes, or on purpose throws the soap. Let me go get it.
Oh.
And there's the image. There's the image that we're all going to be thinking of all day.
Do it again, Rory.
Oh.
More traumatics.
All right. We're going to jump across the pond, as we say, back in the old days. And we're going to go to England, and we're going to bring on Joey. Now, Joey is an Englishman, and he gets to see what England would look like 300 years later had it seceded from itself.
Hi.
We're glad to have you here. You'd be at least armed with several submachine guns, hand grenades, and you'd weigh 500 pounds more. But you're still England, so you can't. You just have to be jealous of what we have evolved into. So we're just glad to have you here. We're just setting the stage so that we know the difference here. But we have these things in common: the mother tongue, which we either use into each other, at each other, on each other, or we just use it linguistically. So we're going to use it linguistically at the moment because we can imagine what the other might look like. So we were talking, Joey and I go back and forth about whose fault is it really? Is it England or the UK, or is it really America? And nobody seems to be winning because we both participate equally. And I find out that the political correct police are just as big all across Europe as they are here in the United States. It's just maybe different factions, but it's difficult because nobody knows who's what anymore. So for example, I use my eyeballs. I have 2 of them today, and actually four eyes. And I look at Rory and I say, I would call him Sir or Mr. Rory, because my eyes tell me it's a male. But what if Rory identifies as a turtle or a cucumber?
Am I not turtly enough for you?
Then I would have to, by political correct law, refer to him as Mrs. Cucumber if it were a female cucumber, whatever.
You will call me Ms.
Ms. Cucumber. And the problem is you get in trouble. So in academic institutions, whether the universities or schools, people are forced to put their pronouns. And that's, to me, putting my pronoun at the end of an email is like meeting somebody at a cocktail party and whipping out my dick. It's the same thing.
Well, it's a cocktail party.
Yes, that's right.
Come on, man.
Ending the conversation with my genitalia. And by the way, check out my genitalia. And so we either have to accept that really all we are genitalia with human beings attached to them that are secondary to our external genitalia. And so you must address me by my genitalia or my imagined genitalia, because I get to do that too. And this seems to cause a problem. Now, I realize there are people freaking out right now. Freaking out. I can't believe you're saying that. But we're all wrestling with it because I don't know what you identify as. And maybe you'll tell me, but if I forget that you were a double backflipping, upside down parsimon dressed as a, you see where I'm going? I'm in trouble. Let's go to England, or formerly known as England, now known as the UK, since QE2 expanded the breadth and scope of this thing. Is this an American nightmare, or are you guys?
No. I mean, we have it in the UK. I live in Berlin, and it's very much a thing there. And yeah, people, I mean, if you're not part of that world, you don't understand it. And I mean, especially for older people as well, it's very, very confusing. And that's not to say that people's gender experiences aren't valid. It's just, why do they need to be validated by literally everybody that they encounter? I think it's all gotten rather silly, if I'm honest.
Well, think about also the exciting nature of language. So German is not known as the language of love or humor. Nobody has ever seen the big book of German jokes. It may exist, but nobody's ever seen it. Maybe it hasn't been written yet either. So German, if you're going to, think of it as Latin. If you ever studied Latin or any complicated language, there's lots of declensions and weird endings and suffixes and all kinds of really complex things. If you say in German, the man is standing there, except the man identifies as a woman, but it's still a man, the sentence sort of mathematically doesn't really work. In English, it's the. It doesn't matter. You can have the worst grammar. We get it. You can say hungry, and in a single word, you've said you're starving to death, you need to eat. You can't really do that in other languages. So to watch a German try to figure out that the man is actually a woman, but there's multiples of them, so it's a they. But it's a single entity, which is now a they, which means you have to calculate the whole sentence. Oh, and in German, you throw the verb at the very end. So you're leading all the way up. And then you gotta polish it off with a verb that doesn't match any of the nouns and special pronouns, and like to watch them slow down and figure out, okay, shit. So it's beautiful, but yet they have to do it too. And we all have to do it in our head. And there's the
She
end of that
is
subject.
very beautiful, but she has a penis.
Well,
So-
here's what I want to
Yeah.
say though, but I want to ask. So for people who are going through these things where they feel like they were born into the wrong body, they don't have any sort of spiritual connection or emotional connection to the body that they are given, what is the answer? Now, there's going to be different answers for everyone because no two people are alike. There's no one size fits all here. I mean, I've talked to so many different people who have dealt with that, and they have totally different opinions over and over again. But like for you, Carrie, so like if you were born and you were feeling that, what would your answer be linguistically? What would you want people to do linguistically?
If I felt that internally I were female, I would, I would certainly let people know. But I think the part where I'm forcing the general population to have to live in my world. Now, the argument is you have a legal mind, Renee, even though you've slept with Putin, but that's another conversation.
That was part of my legal mind, but I'll stand by that one. That was part of my strategy, Carrie. It got me up very high in the world of finance, I'll tell you.
So in your legal mind, me saying that forcing everyone else to have to live in my world where they have to use pronouns, the same could be said that people who have felt different have always had to live in everyone else's world where they were ignored.
Right.
So it's just flipping. Now you know what that feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what's going on. The problem is that you can't see it coming because it's whatever you claim. And so people will also, who are civil libertarians, especially in the United States, will say, I have just as much right not to declare my pronoun as you have to declare yours. So go ahead and declare yours, but you can't force me to figure out what I am because I claim that the exterior side of me is sufficient. But that doesn't really fly. And so in many ways, it takes the LGBTQ LMNOP movement and it makes it a beautiful target for the far right, for the MAGA people, et cetera, for whom this is just completely impossible for them. Not to say that they're not all messing around. We talked last week about the Villages, which is in the middle of Florida, which is this giant collective of some 60,000 people that have now had their Trump signs pulled. They're not allowed to drive around in golf carts with their Trump signs because the park considers it divisive. And well, it is. And so they can't. But it turns out that they're not only mostly Republicans that are having sex to the degree that it is the STD capital of Earth, but they're swingers. And I didn't know this. I was just reliably informed that an upside down pineapple means you're a swinger. And so in front of their manufactured homes are miles of upside down pineapples.
So that's how you know. It's like the sock on the door. So you know when to come knocking, when not to come knocking. It's very smart. Very smart. But that's the thing, though. Most of don't you think there's like a Napoleon complex type deal here where people who feel inwardly shameful about something that they're doing, they don't want other people to get that candy that they're trying to feel shame. They feel shameful about. I mean, usually someone who's secure in their own decisions doesn't go off and try to throw the ball or do a squirrel and try to divert the attention. A lot of times when you see these people who are identifying as traditionalists or conservatives, the reason they're coming out so rabid is because they're just terrified someone's going to figure out that they have these feelings. And to them, those feelings are so icky. They live in terror that someone's going to notice that. So usually it's like, if I see someone who's that rabid about it, some kind of a preference or a circumstance, usually you can sort of follow it back. And yeah, we've seen that in the news. There's been all these, a lot of politicians, famous people, televangelists who have found themselves with some kind of a boy toy or a prostitute. And
always.
it's almost like you can sort of pick them out by how rabid they are against the culture changing.
I think, Renee, you can give credit to Joseph Smith, who started the Mormon religion. He had it all figured out. So here was a guy who was constantly booted out of whorehouses in New York State. He was a real booze bag, and he was in there just causing problems all the time. And so he got literally ridden out on a rail. So he crosses the country, gets to Utah, convinces the Native Americans that live there that the spiritual homeland is in another state, and disinvites them from having lived there for thousands of years, to their peril, at the end of a gun, by the way, and then creates a religion where not only do you get to have all the women you want as sister wives, so you get multiple women, just like a whorehouse, but no drinking, because when he's drinking, things don't work well. So he creates an entire lifestyle that now owns giant radio stations, Marriott hotels, the Mormons, this giant business center. And it's contained within that, although they do evangelize. So for today, we wonder, how is it that I have to express my pronoun in a way that matters? So you fill out an application, it's going to want to know what your pronoun is. You cannot opt out. Do you know what your pronoun is, Rory?
Well, he, him.
Can I qualify my perspective on this? So from the age of about 3 years old until the age of about 23, I genuinely believed that I was transgender. I felt I was trapped in the wrong body. I was a woman. And around the age of 23, I started a process of accepting my physical form the way that it is. I am non-binary, therefore. I could identify as they, them, but no one of my generation grew up identifying as a they, them. It's something that has literally been invented about 5 minutes ago. And yet the people who identify as such get so triggered when you misgender them. And I just think, is it really necessary for someone else to tell you that they see you as you see yourself?
I have a hypothesis, and thank you for saying all of that, because it totally makes sense. Here's my hypothesis. Whenever you have a marginalized group, whatever it is, in any political world, in any world period that you live in, that marginalized group, if it is so oppressed that it has no power to punch up, and up is your government. We're supposed to have representatives. We're supposed to have access to them. They don't listen. They're way far away. Nobody cares anymore. So the only way you could do it is punch down on your own people. Eat your own, because at least they will respond, react, and be disciplined. In other words, your peers will listen to you, and they will shut up, get smaller, behave better, because you can't get the ones above you, who are the true misbehaving ones, in a much larger problem that you can't even get to. So the only thing you can control is micromanaging the words and the behaviors of your own friends. And so it becomes a thing, a cultural thing that then sort of gets bigger and bigger and starts to bubble up. And the people above, they don't want to have anything to do with it. They don't even want to know about it. And so here we are. We're not even allowed to explain it. In fact, talking about it right now is so forbidden. Like, we can't even talk about it. And so,
yeah, I mean, I was speaking to a 77-year-old woman who is, I mean, she's extremely liberal. She's very left wing, but she's terrified of saying something wrong around these people because of the way that they can blow up. And it's so unnecessary. I don't understand why they get so triggered. It's crazy to attack people who are literally on your side. They just maybe don't want to comply with, or they forget to comply with something that you told them that they have to do. It's really silly.
Well, what do you think, Rory? In one facial expression,
it sounds very silly. I'm still thinking about that upside down pineapple.
Yes. Now you know.
And if you sit on a pineapple, very painful. So I do not want to make a mistake. I don't want to call somebody by the wrong pronoun. I try my best. Again, like you say, I observe. If they are dressed and appear to be a female, and I'm going to say her, you know, if I, you know, I just try
It's
to do the best I can, and
yeah,
hopefully, yeah, they won't get triggered if I get it wrong. And
we all do. We all do the best we can. It's just hard because there's no manual and there's no discussion of this. So we really don't know how to proceed except fall down, get back up, and apologize. But again, I think this is simply a response to powerlessness of an entire group of people. Let's look at the Democrats, for instance. The Republicans have some interesting, and I'm independent, so I'm on no team here. I just want the best, most capable, competent, founding father level person out there if there ever were such a thing left. That said, the Democrats are pretty beaten down. They're constantly insulted. They're excoriated. They're castrated endlessly by the Republicans. And they have virtually no power. I mean, when was the last time you saw the Democrats rise up inside our chambers of government and say, enough, enough? When was the last time you saw them on the news every single night pounding the way the Republicans do? When was the last time you saw them show a giant spine? It's kind of like we haven't seen that. We see Chuck Schumer, the best we get is he'll pull his glasses down to the end of his nose and say he's terribly disappointed. Now, let me tell you what disappointment is. Disappointment is when your summer house in Nantucket has sheets that haven't been changed by the maid for over 2 weeks, and your house guests arrive. That's very disappointing. But this political crap is outrageous. And I'm not talking about the pronouns, what's actually going on. So the Democrats have been, in a way, trained to just be smaller and smaller and smaller with a smaller range of motion. That leaves people who are open-minded and reasonable, who are not obsessing about dressing up as elk and storming the Capitol building. They have way better things to do. But it leaves them diddling around with these little microscopic topics that at least they can correct. At least we can correct the language. And so the big stuff never gets touched or handled. And that's how fascism continues to grow, because we're not paying attention. We're too busy chasing the ball of pronouns. That's not to say that how you identify is not relevant. It's everything, because it's you, it's me. But the fact that we get caught up in it, and this is where we're putting our energy and not dealing with the fascists at the top, maybe we need to be reminded to get together and push up.
Yeah, that would be actually my sense too, is that you always want to look at, like, are we actually making progress? Are we actually advancing? Or are we just sort of putting some kind of bandage on the wound and ignoring the deeper infection? And I've noticed people do that. We do that in civil rights stuff. We do that in international law stuff, human rights violations. We can get that wrong because, like you said, it's almost like some kind of an easy, quick fix thing where it makes people sort of feel better. This is a little bit better for me. I'm getting acknowledged. See, things have changed. But they even did a report. I mean, like, I'd have to find it. But recently it was in the news. They did a report, and people who identify as transgender don't seem to have any better quality of life now than they did 10 years ago when they interviewed them. So clearly, if language was the answer, and if it was the main answer, we should have made a lot of progress, because there's no job that you can have right now that you're not identifying. I mean, Google has all this stuff where it's inclusive. You've got to identify your pronoun, even if you work at these major tech companies. It should have made a difference. It should have trickled down, but it didn't trickle down experientially to the people that they say they're actually helping. That's an indicator to me that, like you said, this is just a way to get someone who, it's just a way to, like, sort of, it's palliative care, but it's not curing anything. And I see Joey, I see you nodding along.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think there are genuine issues that need to be addressed. I mean, trans rights are not where they need to be. And all this policing of pronouns and discussing the alleged 100 genders, which, I mean, I don't have a fucking clue what the 100 genders could possibly be. I don't know how anyone could possibly think up 100 things they could label as specific different genders. All this bollocks is distracting from the real issues that need to be addressed and the real work that needs to be done.
I think we need to use the word bollocks in the United States. I think it's a
Yeah.
great word.
I perked up when he said it.
I did too.
I got a Sex Pistols flashback immediately when I heard it.
You know, another word I love that's England is pillock. Pillock. Now, we
That's a
don't
good
really
one.
know that word here, but tell us about a pillock. If you call someone a pillock.
I mean, it's just someone that's a bit of an idiot, really.
I like the word numpty.
Yes.
That's the one that tickles me.
Well, pillock comes from etymologically from the Norwegian word pill, which means penis. So pillock is basically a dickhead, and it's oldie Englishy. And it's just a wonderful insult that just means nitwit. But the roots and derivations. So sort of jumping on what you said there, Joey, about having 100 genders, I'm imagining how tiring that would be, even expressing 5 in one afternoon.
Yeah, totally.
You know, so I get it, because if you could cut yourself into 100 pieces, that means you've got 100 more people in your army. So the key is to focus that army toward doing something. And because these discussions really are forbidden, and when I helped start the gay channel on Sirius XM some years ago, this was the kind of stuff we talked about. Like, what does it mean to go on a date? Nobody knew, because there's no founding fathers. Like, how do you do anything? And this would have been the kind of content we would have discussed, but it's so forbidden now. And I don't know. I mean, there's really no answer except to hope that people can get that they're eating their own. Like, we should not be biting each other. We're not biting the people above us for not using pronouns. We're biting the people below us who are not using the pronouns. And that's all you're doing, is taking beaten down, oppressed people and making them weaker, and then thinking they're going to somehow rise up. And you can't. It's like, if you don't feed something, it gets weak. So you got to feed and nourish. So what can we do to reverse that? I don't know. We suddenly got very serious here, and I apologize. It got very serious.
Well, I was going to say earlier, I think that the day is coming when, they're going to create new gender pronouns, like Dan Aykroyd's Decabet, on SNL. And soon we'll be talking like Jodie Foster in Nell. Chickapay 199, tie in the wind. So, and he's just said that they've done it. Now there's 100. Oh my God.
Yeah, there's 100.
Look at
And
this chart. Here we
I mean,
go. Follow me.
I read a news story about how they wanted to introduce it into the education system to teach children about these so-called 100 genders. I mean, I think on the surface level, kids need to learn about trans issues, but if you go too deep on it, I mean, kids are incredibly impressionable. They get really silly ideas and go through phases, and you don't really want to be putting ideas into their head. And then because it does happen in schools within girl groups. If one of them decides that they are transgender, the entire girl group will decide that they are transgender. And there are people that are saying that we should make it easier for children to get on puberty blockers, which can cause infertility. And there are other side effects that we don't even know about yet. And they want to remove psychiatrists from the equation with determining whether or not a child is genuinely transgender. They should allegedly be taken on their word rather than going through rigorous clinical assessments to determine that the diagnosis is legitimate.
Well, part of this, throwing back the political blanket here again, is let's take the state of Florida, where Rory is sitting, where I am sitting, where it is a 3rd-degree felony to say you're gay on state property. Technically, it's against the law. Nobody's been arrested yet or put in handcuffs or in dripping stone-walled prisons, but it could happen. Point is the governor lied, a terminological inexactitude, as your Winston Churchill would have said, a prevarication, as Homer would have said. He lied and said that schools were teaching about all this sort of gender dysmorphia. Not happening. Never did happen in
Marjorie Taylor
kindergarten.
Greene ran with that one too.
Never happened.
In the chambers.
Never. Yeah, it was a preemptive law simply to make voters get excited that this guy was strong and he was handling that problem. It never happened. And so much of this has never happened as a controversy, but we're responding to it as if all hell is broken loose and everything is on fire. And so we're all trying to repair a problem that never existed. I'm not saying that your orientation or your personal observation of who you are, I'm not saying that unexists. I'm saying that it's a problem. Now we're pulling psychiatrists out of the picture and all the rest of it as if it's every person. And it's just not. It's some people. So really it gets kind of down to a libertarian question. Does a family and a person have the right to self-determination? And remember, this is the key to the U.S. Constitution. This is the key to our Declaration of Independence against formerly known as King George III, the right to self-determination. And if you want to do whatever you want to do, you do have that right, or you don't. Either you are a victim of the state, the government is your nanny, which I believe most conservatives throw up at that idea, but they're the first ones to handcuff you and say, no, you can't make these choices. So we get back to stupid. One finger pointing back forward, three pointing back at you. Well, that closed the argument. That's done.
Come on, guys. Somebody say there was so much going on there. There was so much going on there.
Well, you're the legal mind. That's why you're
pineapples
here.
and puberty blockers.
He's still thinking of the pineapples, and he's still thinking about falling onto I forget whose crotch that was. Oh, Kevin Spacey, was it?
No, that was last week. This
That
week
was
was
last
dropping
week.
the soap.
We're moving ahead. Yeah, we're
This
moving
was
ahead
different.
now. I did want to just sort of highlight a couple of the comments here because I think that the audience has some really interesting points. We're seeing a lot of people agreeing with this, and I'm interested in that because I've interviewed a lot of people who do identify as trans, a lot of people who are in the LGBTQ alphabet, and again, I'm seeing these concepts come over and over and over again, but most people don't want to say it publicly because no matter where you are, even if you're in the alphabet, you feel like if you say this, you're going to come across as a bigot. We even had one of our our viewers right now, he felt like he had to say, I'm not a bigot.
Right.
I'm just feeling, yeah. And it's one of those things where once you close down conversation, that becomes a place where other things can fester. This is what we talk about when we talk about the KKK, and we talk about, you want to know where you stand with someone. And one of the things that I'm always concerned about is once people feel that they cannot actively engage in discourse, particularly in universities, but really anywhere or in the media, if you feel that you can't, like if you're the person who would be the minority in that scenario, don't you want to know who's friend or foe? But if they're all wearing that mask, it's terrifying. As a woman, I can tell you, if some guy is a misogynist and if he's a criminal and if he's going to attack me, I feel safer knowing who he is. I want to be able to identify him. But right now, when you look around, everybody is sort of walking the walk, talking the talk, but behind closed doors, people are not getting promoted. People are not getting jobs. There is so much bigotry. There is so much violence. In fact, the world is more violent statistically now than it was 20 years ago. We are seeing a lot of violence against people who identify as trans, who are LGBTQ plus, women. We are seeing a lot of that, and those are just global numbers. And so obviously, if we were taking care of it with the language, we wouldn't be in that scenario. So that's one of the things that I think about, and that's why I'm glad that we have this discourse. And I think it's interesting that people who identify in different ways, with different bodies, different ages, different generations, different orientations, so many of us are coming together and saying, well, let's at least start to talk about this. And I don't feel good about this. And the more that we do that, the more everyone actually is going to win. That's what I personally believe.
I think that's why jumping off the high dive today and doing, clearly this is frictive material. You know, it just makes everyone rankle and it freaks them out. And we all have to declare we're not bigots. I mean, we're pushed up against a wall because it really is a forbidden conversation. And when you think about the First Amendment, and to your point, Renee, the First Amendment is very interesting because it's more than just, it's not some vague, well, freedom of speech. Let's just make that number one. Back in when we were subjects of a king, if you disagreed with the crown, your head suddenly fell off, and there it was rolling down the street. Can't figure out why. It just fell off your spine, and they're kind of like France, just that fell off your head, rolling down the street.
Right.
And that was a problem. So the founding daddies of this joint realized that one of the purposes of the First Amendment, not obvious to anybody, is that if you don't let people get out in the middle of the street and yell F you to the king, they're going to do something about the king. Yeah. They're going to do something about rich people. They're going to do something about anything that upsets them. They're going to do something. So you let them take the pressure out of their pressure cookers. They can scream, they can yell, they can dance, they can flip the bird, all legal. And then they're probably going to go home and get drunk and watch Netflix.
Right.
Problem solved. But if you don't let them say stuff, they start planning. They get together with their friends. They say, I've had enough. We need to fix this. And the only way that generally people have ever fixed stuff is through violence.
Right,
And so
exactly. And that's my fear. And that's what I think, that's what I believe that we are seeing around the world, these sort of backlashes. And so that's why I keep asking people the question, do you want to feel good about something, or do you want to actually be better? Do you want to actually have this cure? It's, again, it goes back to, do you want the Band-Aid or do you want the antibiotics? Do you want to actually see some sort of a change? There is a question that I think Joey kind of tapped into, but JD wanted to know, is the breakdown in traditional gender identification a 21st century thing, or has it always been an issue but just not talked about? And I think Joey sort of delved in there.
Yeah.
Someone wants to jump in.
I mean, gay men have been non-binary and gender fluid throughout millennia. I think the only culture that I know that had a word for it is the Native Americans, and that's two-spirit.
Berdache. That was the word, yeah. And it's a twin spirit. And it's been said, going back to the ancient Greeks, that being gay is a third gender, actually. So it's both female and it's male at the same time, making it a third gender. So some people have said, you know, people like Harry Hay and other sort of early founding fathers in the 1950s, when these discussions and sociologists started to look at it more seriously, that if you took a gay man and put him in a room with a straight woman, and she was talking about her boyfriend and how he had cheated on her and all that, he could really relate. Then he walks across the hall and there's the husband, and he's talking about the cylinder cap fell off his Ford F-150 pickup truck and he can't get his spark plugs to fire. And God damn it, he's going to have to get the thing towed and his boss is going to kill him. The gay man can relate fully with the male. But you put the man and the woman together, and the man is from Mars and the woman is from Penis and whatever all that book is. They don't seem to fully understand and sympathize because they're separate entities. And this is not to say anything about is that good or bad. It's just one of the weird bicameral issues or interests that the gay person seems to have been saddled with. It is not fun and easy to be gay. Who wants to take a lead pipe to the head in third grade? Hands up? No hands up, except mine went up as a demonstration. But really, nobody invites this stuff. It's just a natural phenomenon. And as we all know, all humans, all 100%, all humans start as female, all of them. Then later on, you get males. But everyone starts as a woman. Some people retain part of that femininity within as fully functioning males later on. And then to those degrees, like a clock, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, more and more and more, until you end up with non-binary and more. And who knows? It's shades of gray, just like sexuality, going back to the 1950s when they were studying digger wasps and realized that digger wasps were having same-sex relationships. Oh my God. The Kinseys said, you got to be fucking kidding. Digger wasps, like men wasps, are getting with men wasps, females, not all the time. Then in the mid 2000s, a fruit fly study was done, and it's appropriate. It was a fruit fly. It just happens to be a very basic creature. But they changed the orientation of a fruit fly 5 times in a single hour simply by raising and lowering the temperature in the room. And the hormones change inside of the fruit fly. The next thing you know, it's humping. Egbert is humping Edgar's hairy leg, and then 2 minutes later, he's going over to Mildred. So these are biological imperatives. Otherwise, they would not exist. There would never, ever have been an ancient Greece, all that beautiful pottery with a lot of hokey pokey. Never would have happened. No, the screen didn't freeze.
Undeniable. It's there. It's
No, I'm
documented.
totally with you. I mean, gender is essentially a spectrum. Gender identity is a spectrum, and everyone is somewhere on it. And it has been found that there are differences in the way the neurons light up during speech in typically in men who are like typically male, and females who are typically female. But a lot of gay men, and especially transgender trans women, have neuronal patterns that are more closely in line with heterosexual women. And I think it's the same for lesbians and trans men as well. The neuronal patterns during speech are more closely in line with the gender that they identify with.
Well, yeah. I mean, it seems like this is rocket science for so many of us, but it's always been that way. People always knew it, but now it's got a category. Just like in the late 1800s, when Sigmund Freud invented a word that had never existed in humankind called homosexuality. Never had been a word, therefore never a medical category.
Oh yeah, because the Greeks, they didn't have a word for it. They were all at it, but they didn't have a word to describe it, did they?
In fact, in the Bible, the New Testament, that is, does Jesus mention it even one time? Even one time. Now, he mentions everything that's bad 100 times, but he doesn't mention it even one time because you know what? It's a nothing. It's a non-issue. And then when Sigmund Freud comes up with it as a word, it becomes a syndrome or a pathology. And then when the New York Times prints that word, it now becomes a legal standard in the United States that's punishable based on British law. It's not your fault, Joey, but
yeah, well, so I don't know if this is true, but I heard that the original Old Testament, the current translation translations that we have of it today, it does mention homosexuality a lot, but I heard that was actually a mistranslation, and the original text in, I don't know if it was Hebrew or ancient Hebrew or Aramaic, it said it was pederasty. Pederasty is a more accurate translation.
Yes. Which is different. And that's what they did. They luxuriously in 1947 entered that into a lot of American Bibles, homosexuality, swapping out the words. So people actually thought that Jesus was really pissed off and was speaking for God. He'd waited a couple of thousand years, but finally, when he printed this Bible in 1947, God, on the Gutenberg press, Gott, gut, yes, they come from the same thing. Boy, so much fun with language here. But they thought, well, it had always been that way. And yet it never existed until it became a word, and then a word became a legal punishment, and then it became a pathology around which hundreds of millions of dollars have been earned by psychologists trying to deal with this curious phenomenon that we've never known about before. And our screen did not freeze.
No, I was just reading the comment by John Duncan.
Yeah,
I can't read that far. What is it?
Jesus only level one law: love your God, love the Lord your God, and love one another. He did not condemn homosexuality.
Yeah. And was Jesus married to a woman? Now, if Jesus had had a girlfriend, it would be in there. Anyone ever think about that? If he'd had
I
children?
have heard people
Like,
say
where's
it
the
was a bit
kid?
suspect that he was a dude that went around with 12 blokes around him.
I mean,
Uh,
listen, all of them they sired children, they had heirs, they carried on the legacy, nothing. And his mother, a virgin, and I apologize to all Catholics, I'm Episcopalian, whatever that means. That's Church of England from the old days. His mother, a virgin, is somewhere, and suddenly this giant penis comes bursting through the ceiling of a barn. I guess I don't know how a virgin gets impregnated by God, but there had to be intromission, wouldn't you think? A little rumbustication, o flagrante, a little something, and there it is. And didn't Joseph get pissed off? I mean, wouldn't that be cheating? And isn't that in the Old Testament? I mean, that's a major affront. He's going to walk around with a pregnant lady that is not his baby in front of everyone and say, I don't know. Wasn't me. We're getting married. Wow, that's controversial. And no, your screen didn't freeze.
You gotta listen to these angels. They're telling you.
yeah,
Sorry,
I
it
think
wasn't you, but
so. I think that the angel Gabriel was God's vessel, so it was actually the angel Gabriel that did the fucking, but it was God's seed.
oh jeez.
What a good time to end.
Was there an upside down pineapple involved?
What is he? Nature finds a way. Gender and sexuality are not the same thing. Well, that's right. That's exactly right. But we tend to put it all in the same boat, don't we? Gender and sexuality.
Well, remember too, there's also, when you guys were talking just now, it also occurred to me the puritanical Western modern mind has really tampered with not just Christianity's interpretation of what sexuality is, but even the, Judaism before that and all. If you go to Europe, like I think all of us have been to Europe, you're going to see Renaissance paintings. If you go to the Sistine Chapel, where the Pope even celebrates Mass, if you go to the Sistine Chapel, you're going to see naked people. You're going to see a lot of this shying away from the body as a sacred vessel, the shying away from sexuality. This is the Puritanism that comes in more recently, and it's more of a Western thing. Sexuality does not always mean shame, but there's this shame introduction that is throwing me off kind of, because obviously if somebody believes in God is the one who invented the sex act. And that's the first command, by the way, in the entire Bible, in the book of Genesis, go forth and multiply. The very first command is to have sex. And I don't know why there's all this squeamishness and, oh, it's so bad to have sex and to have I'm not sure how people who believe in God are feeling like they're constantly violating some kind of a divine order by having a body. We're not Gnostics. The Gnostics did believe that the body was evil and there's all these secrets and all that. But, basically all of the major religions that I'm aware of are propagated on us having sex and that being even a sacred moment that you can, that's something that the divine operates within. Look at the book of the Song of Songs, Song of Solomon. It's this
Or
beautiful
Song of the South, which is
book of the
banned.
Bible.
Yeah, I think it's insane that in America, violence is less taboo than sex.
Right. Thank you.
Well,
isn't that strange? You're in Germany right now, so you're in a totally different reality than what we see here in America. In America, the body. This teacher now Carrie and Rory can speak to this because they're in Florida. Wasn't a Florida teacher sanctioned or something because she showed her students the David statue because it was naked recently? That's like this year or late last year. There's such a trauma and terror about an American child being exposed to a human body.
What, no fig leaf?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And
I
I
mean,
find that
in,
I know that in
I hadn't
Germany
heard
that
that
would be
story,
considered
but
really
I
weird.
I believe it.
Yeah, they don't cover that here. Out of sight, out of mind, and that's why these legal maneuvers work so well. Is the public here has no idea it's happening, so it looks
Right,
like we're all in on it. The
right.
local news, the newspapers, they don't touch it because the legislature is so powerful and the governor is so powerful that he rules by fiat. So it's
Mm.
like Donald Trump. Do you really want him tweeting at you? Oh my God, he tweeted at me, I will never be reelected. It's sort of like that. And if you think about the kind of sexual dynamics, you go back to, say, the Senate of Rome in 680 AD, when they really formalized the Bible. And we had decided, or the Catholic Church had decided it was the Holy Roman Empire had decided it was the Catholic Church and that it would distribute militia throughout all of Europe that were an extension of the church, the Pope being the head of the church. And these militia went out and collected taxes from everyone. This is why Martin Luther in 1510, 1517 nailed up his 96 theses, not to be confused with feces, onto the church door and said, enough of this stuff, enough coming and taking my money and then splitting and we get nothing for it. And so back then, if you're trying to run an empire, and the Roman Empire did something that no other empire has done. You have an empire, you conquer someone, they're suddenly citizens, just like that. In the Roman Empire, you're a citizen or a slave or a citizen slave, really. But in order to do that, and now you've got the Middle East, and now you've got Britannia, and you've got here, and you've got there, all over the place going on in this giant empire with all these disparate religions and beliefs, and everyone is at the self-serve pump, and nobody's really behaving or paying or following the same musical notes. So you have to organize them, which means you have to start reducing the range of motion. You have to start limiting what people can do and what they cannot do. And during the Black Plague in the late 1300s and 1400s, men chronically went to brothels. It wasn't a bad thing. It's what you did. And women, apparently, wives, understood this. You could see a great example of it in a place called Český Krumlov in the Czech Republic, in a little valley somewhere, an ancient town that was never destroyed. And the whorehouse is sitting right at the bridge, exactly where people walked back and forth every day. And men went in. It was a bathhouse originally. You went in, and that was the only place with running water, and women would wash you with a happy ending, apparently. And so during the Black Plague, they closed these things down because they realized they didn't understand the science, the medicine, the virology of it, but they knew that every time one of these guys went in, he took something home and the wife died. So the church literally came up with monogamy. And this was monogamy for married people, not monogamy for priests who in around 1210 lost their right to marry women. Why? Because you are a member of the Holy Roman Empire. You're the only one that can read. You're the only one that gets an automatic plug and play palace. You get gold, you get antiques, you get all this great stuff. And if you are marrying a woman and you have a kid and they don't want to be part of the church, they split with the inheritance. All the booty that the church has built and collected and put with you, you've just inherited away with your kid who's like going to take off with the loot and not be a member of the church. So they made sure that men could not marry women anymore and sire children. Likewise, nuns were all married to Jesus, and that was the end of their procreative prowess. So in many ways, you're limiting the range of motion. You're creating an empire that works like a corporation with harsh rules, and sex is the big one. Because when you're having sex with people, you're meeting them, you're having emotions, you're extending your ideas, et cetera, and of course, procreating and moving product from A to B. So it makes sense that we've inherited that. And if you think about it, in a country that is so uptight about everything, especially politics, the Sex Act is the most liberating thing of all. And while an individual may want to be liberated, he does not want his neighbor to be liberated. Example, if you had a plebiscite, a public vote in the United States, and you said all white people get free, unlimited, all-you-can-eat medical care starting tomorrow, paid out of their taxes, and they don't have to pay more for taxes. Unlimited, free medical care for all white people tomorrow. Had a national vote, all white people would vote yes. They say, now let's include brown people, Asians, and gays. No. And that's why today it's no, because it's not just for a group of people that would love it. It's for everyone, and they don't want to share with their neighbors. And that's a whole separate conversation for another time. But this is sort of where we're at today now. It's, can you share with your neighbors? And for a lot of people, it's no way, because they think there's a finite amount of everything. And if they share it, it gets smaller and smaller, not realizing that it has no effect. The better you do, the better I do. Simple.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up the connection between sex and the state owning the child. That's actually in, like constitutional law, when you have to study all of the cases that led up to things like privacy concerns, like contraception, like abortion. You're learning that the precedent that was set, that was very open. This is not like some conspiracy theory. You can just go back and read the precedent. It's about that America, or any, this wouldn't be unique to America, but I'm just talking about American law right now. America has a stake in who you give birth to, because they're paying for your child to be educated. They're paying for the infrastructure. They're paying for the police forces, right? In their mind, they own, and legally it's like they own. That's why a parent cannot do anything that they want to their child. You'll notice social services will step in. The state really owns the child in America and in a lot of other countries. And there are other countries that don't believe in that as much, but that's something that makes people nervous. Marriage is more about controlling chattel, controlling the future generations, and controlling the workforce that America believes and really does own. So this is not about all warm and fuzzy feelings, right and wrong. This is a business exchange. Your sexuality, how you use your sexuality, how you use your body is a concern of the state. Think about why prostitution is largely illegal, not everywhere in America, but most places of America. Why is it that you can't choose to receive money for sex acts, generally speaking? Because that's something that the country has a vested and a financial interest in. So, we have to talk about patriarchy. We have to talk about how children and human beings are owned by the state. This is not a good and bad thing. This is not, so Carrie, when the things you're talking about, I think most people are not wanting to hear. I think most people want to believe, oh, marriage is between one man and one woman because that's what God said, and that makes me feel good. And God forbid you should ever have another relationship or a feeling for anyone else out. That all comes back to a legalistic view that was imposed on us, and other cultures have chosen in their ethos to not believe in that. And in fact, the things that we're taught are right and wrong over here. There's another culture that considers us to be extremely unethical. So a lot of the decisions that we are making about sexuality here, that we say, oh, that's because we're good people, we do good things with our sexuality. There's another culture that thinks we are being absolutely disgusting and violating human rights and autonomy and choice when we enact that here. And that's something that a lot of people are not really willing to talk about or really say, but it's actually true. I mean, it's something that it's not a point of view, it's reality. If you travel, it's reality. If you talk to people from other cultures, it's reality.
As we wrap this up, Joey, you live in Berlin, which is really still one of the most open-minded places 80 years later. It was not always, but it is now one of the most open-minded places. It has some of the greatest civil rights in the world. The German passport is better than the American passport. Who would have ever thought anyone could ever say that? But it's just the way it is right now. What are you guys, what's your European sense of us former colonials over here?
Oh, I mean, we just think you're retarded, honestly. So fucking backwards. I think half the country is just a bunch of fucking apes running around with fucking hammers. It's insane.
And you wouldn't be wrong.
And it's really fucking scary because American politics affects the entire world. Yeah. I mean, you've got Donald Trump saying that inviting Putin to attack NATO allies is crazy. I mean, I can't believe that we're seeing it. It's insane. I mean, when he threw his hat in the race in 2016, I knew that he would win because since Ronald Reagan, the Republican Party has been dumbed down lower and lower and lower, and it's so low brow now. Those are the I mean, that's
That's
just
why
where
he
it is.
switched parties. He was a Democrat, and he switched
Yeah,
parties to the Republicans because he even said in an interview, they would probably vote me in,
yeah.
with
I
no
mean,
experience and
exactly.
yeah.
But I think there's something going on with him, because if you look at videos of him, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, and compare it to how he is now, it's like a totally different person. I'm sure he was still a narcissist back then, but he was so much more softly spoken. His vocabulary was larger. He was a lot more articulate, and now he's a fucking grunt, isn't he?
Cocaine is a terrible drug.
Well, I don't know. I think it's meth. I think it's meth, honestly.
Well, and he rolled that into an Adderall habit, but that's again a different show and a different topic. He wears diapers because of all the drugs he did.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And
well, we're lucky because he's ours. He's ours. He's our gift.
You're just being terrible. You're being nasty to me. See, this is how the show always ends.
Yeah.
You're bashing me.
Well, this is probably a good time to end. We're at exactly an hour and 23 seconds. Thank you for all the comments. I am a little far away from being able to read them when they come up, but I know that Renee has done a great job in bringing a few up. I've been just seeing them come up, boom, 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 boom. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Rory Penland. Thank you, the great and delicious Renee, former paramour to the great Vladimir Putin, but no longer.
No longer. The para has been taken out. The amour has been taken out, and there's no love, and there's no para. There's nothing.
She's not like that anymore.
And a keen legal mind, which of course turns me on wildly. I'm clawing at my screen, trying
all
to
the time. That's just we just claw at each other through the screen all the time, and then Trump gets jealous. Yeah.
And I want to thank Joey for having come from across the pond. He's in Berlin. He's from the UK originally. And we've been talking on WhatsApp back and forth and just sort of comparing notes, your country, my country. Where did it start? Where will it all end? So, enjoying these global perspectives. And thank everyone. Thank you guys all for joining us today. And Jonathan, thank you so much. And thank you, everyone else. And we will look forward to seeing you next week, maybe at this time. I guess it's really up to the grown-ups like Renee.
I think we're going to have a slightly different time next week, or I think starting on the 21st, whenever that is, because then Journeys is going to start up on Wednesdays again. But we will be in touch. Let me figure that out, and we'll see. But we can still do Wednesdays if we want to do Wednesdays. We might just do it a little bit earlier or a little bit later. So, oh, you're muted, Carrie. You were clawing at me so much that you muted yourself. We can't hear you. We can't hear
now
you.
You can.
Now we can.
You'll notice I didn't do anything. I have my whole studio, which is a giant studio here, hooked up to Amazon Alexa because I was clever and thought, well, it'd be great if it's all automated. And Alexa decided that I'd said enough when I said yes.
She just said it's over. It's over right now. Maybe you pronouned her wrong. I don't know.
No doubt I did. Well, thank you once again, everyone. And we will look forward to seeing you next time. Don't forget, subscribe. Go to rethinkingheroes.com and subscribe to our free newsletter so you get a copy of our public radio shows that are FCC regulated. So they're a little more polite. But we do get to do deep dives into the little more heady subject matter. Rethinkingheroes.com. Subscribe to the free newsletter. And thank you again, Rory Penland. Thank you again, the great and wonderful Renee, and thank you, Joey, for for staying awake in Berlin, which is still awake, always
24/7.
All right, you guys, we'll see you later.